You know, it's said that genius is being Janus-headed. Now, Janus was a Roman god that could look in two directions at the same time. And many people in studies have talked about genius as being this ability. You know, and the two directions that Janus was looking, it was the beginnings, the gates, the transitions, the time, duality, a doorway, passages, frames, and endings, beginnings and endings, the place where we start and the place where we end, and all that is between the two, and all the possibilities and doorways and transitional pieces that can happen through time. And today, I want to talk about going back to the one. Because you see, we are called as human beings, as sentient consciousness, to be a part of it all and to be aware that we're part of it all. As well, we are called to be a part from it all, to see it not being connected to it, but to see the wholeness of it, if you will. This whole concept of Janus-headed, you know, we've talked about the center and oscillating in and out of it, and we're also oscillating in and out of oneness, although that oscillation is a bit of a delusion because of time. What did Einstein intone? All sense of separation is optical delusion. I want us to think today of a growing plant and the node where a new branch begins to happen, that little vortex. It's an amazing thing if you watch plants grow. It's full of these. And now I want, but last week Bob used the term node of consciousness, and it got me thinking about an analogy of consciousness of a tree and roots. You see, the two directions we are called to be are roots and wings. We are to be connected to it, but we are also given the ability to fly above it. Some call it transcendence. I don't know what to call it. And some people think it's either or, but truthfully, a full human on the spiritual journey, it's roots and wings. You know what you're rooted in. Now, the node of consciousness, think of a dogwood tree. Every branch has a node, and it branches off, and it becomes like the rest of the tree. It flowers. If you're an apple tree, you do apple blossoms, and then you make apples, okay? And every branch is doing it. Consciousness is different. Remember the three essential processes of differentiation, complexification, and semi-permeability? You see, you are a branch in this tree of consciousness. But the difference is every branch is different. Every branching off point, if you will, creates a unique expression. Think of a tree where every branch has a different flower, a different fruit, a different leaf. Now you're looking at human consciousness. This is what has been happening. You can trace thinking back. We've done that with language. What was the first question? Probably, where are you? And we've talked about that, how language happened, how printing presses happened, how TV, radio, internet, social media, it's all here, and it's all part of this branching that is happening. So it's important, and this is what the spiritual journey to me is about. It's about the pull, the gravity that draws us to this happening that is our deepest nature, the oneness of it all. At the same time, we have to recognize that consciousness is doing something new in each of us, and therefore we are given free rein to go, to be, to create, and we each are. Every single one of you is different. When I think of the Olympics a number of years ago and those 10,000 Chinese dancers, as they were all dancing in perfect sync of oneness, I kept thinking how every one of them has a different thought about what's going on right now. Every one of them has their own idiosyncratic iteration of what brought them there, what they're battling, all of that. You see, we each have this, it's called autonomy. And although autonomy is, again, part of the delusion of separation, it's also an integral piece of the ongoing development and evolution of consciousness itself. So, the oneness of being, this unity, how do we keep returning to it? How do we allow ourselves to... the word oscillation is becoming less and less valuable to me because it's a time issue. I think we're both and all the time. I think we're in and out of it with our awareness, but that awareness is triggered in time and the chemical stuff going on in our brain, and it's rooted in something larger. And this return to the larger, this feeling of this gravity that pulls us into it. And more people are being pulled into the spiritual journey than ever. And those who aren't are fighting very hard not to. And those are other issues. So Bob is with me today. Mary Ann is actually hard at work. They're getting ready to do a fundraiser for the childhood cancer organization she works for. And we bless her and hope she gets a lot done. Bob, I just threw a whole lot out there, but I think both of us, wouldn't say we're geniuses, but we are Janus-headed in some degree.
Yeah, as you were talking, I'm thinking to myself now, how am I going to reply to this? And my mind is just going in 1,000 different directions at once and spinning around and so forth. And, consciousness is such a strange and beautiful thing. And we really don't even know what it is. We kind of feel like we're conscious because we're aware of time passing. We're aware of our, our jobs, and we're aware of what we do day by day and what has happened in our lives. But it's more than that. It's being able to perceive a chunk of the universe that is within our focus as an individual. And that's what I was getting at when I used that term node of consciousness. And it's all of these different points of view that are so integral to whatever the larger oneness of consciousness in the universe is. All of these metaphors that you've used are excellent. You could also say, well, you look up at the sky at night and you see these little pinpricks of light, stars. Each one of them is a unique entity that is transmitting energy. And there's literally trillions of these things. And there's billions of people on this planet that each have their own unique perspective on what they're aware of in this universe. And how this all comes together gets us back to the mystery that we've been struggling with since I've known you, Red Hawk, and humankind has been struggling with it since they became aware that they could think and that they were different. And there's a lot of different theories about how that happened, how the separation of the tribal awareness evolved into the individual awareness, and so forth. But here we are in this planetary, for want of a better term, I'll steal one from the movies, this matrix of consciousness.
Yeah.
And we're all interacting with each other, and we're all influencing each other. And
there is a place that is here, that is now, and is connected, and where we are free. Now, what I want for our listeners is for you all to be free, to have a good sense of roots and wings. And I have to put with that, I want me to do that. It ain't a done deal in my universe. It's still a journey that is calling me back to itself over and over and over. And this place where I used to call, and I've called it in previous episodes, the vortex of wonderment, that place that sits between the within and without of our being. The within is the roots part, as well as the wings part. The without part is the roots part as well as the wings part. You see, they're both operative in their own universe, and they're both hopefully calling us that our creative sense, what is happening new in us, is to the benefit of the whole thing. And what I've tried to lay out with Bob's node thing is it's far hard for me to look at a tree without seeing the history of consciousness. And if you want to know the soil of consciousness, it is the earth herself. If you want to know the soil of the earth herself, you look at everything from gravity to quantum physics to the speed of light. You get into physics. You get into astronomy. You see, they're layered, and now we're at being, life, and consciousness. Each is rooted in the other and giving rise to something new. What's happening with consciousness is each of us is given a gateway into this creative aspect of the universe itself. Chopra says that that what oneness is this silence that is there, and any sound can come out of it at any moment, and it does at every moment. It's the possibilities and the potential and the reality of allowing that to happen, so that the universe, you realize you're not just speaking on your own behalf. I don't care what some of these entrepreneurs think. They're doing it. It's happening for all of us, and it's hopefully to all of our best interests. And that's what I think consciousness is doing, and why it is important to keep returning to our understanding of what the oneness of being is, what this unity of being is, that we might participate in our local creative minds of whatever. Bobby said, we don't know what it is that consciousness is, but each of us will attest to the fact it's happening.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
And you talk about creativity, and you talk about thoughts being part of consciousness and so forth. And I always, as you well know, I go back to Carl Jung and his metaphor for consciousness, which was the individual node of consciousness emerging from like an ocean of consciousness. Physicists talk about the underlying ocean of potentiality in the universe that's below everything. Well, Jung said, all right, we have consciousness, then that implies that we have the unconscious. And the unconscious is everything else except what we as an individual are conscious of. So all of us are emerging from this same field of potentiality, the same ocean of potential. And consciousness comes to us as individuals through our experiences, through our unique DNA pattern, through our family, through all of the things that we've been exposed to during our life. And if we are trying to become aware of the one, what we're really trying to do is cleanse all of the filters that life has imparted upon us and allow a clearer stream of creativity to emerge from this universal potential and come through us in as undistorted a manner as possible. And that is my personal definition of enlightenment.
And again, enlightenment is a process. It's not somewhere you get to. And that's right. Part of the learning. And now we've given you a couple really good analogies for this. The tree analogy, the wave emerging from the ocean analogy, and there's another one. Everything's vibrations. Some vibrations are dissonant with each other. Some work really well. They're in accord. This symphonic aspect of harmonic adjustment, if you will, that each of us are trying to negotiate every day, is what the journey is. It is a matter of you better like jazz, because life is pretty much you're given an instrument and the band is playing. It's been playing for a long time. So
And you're improvising right along with it.
that's right. So how are you going to play? And this is, again, another metaphor of the individual and the oneness, of moving back into the one and out of the one, of realizing your awareness has the potential to delight and joy in the very expression of an emergent thought, of an emergent possibility, whether it's a song or a book or a podcast or a conversation with a friend or knitting. It's all one thing. I'm finding that in cooking. I love to cook, and I realize it's meditation for me. You can't rush boiling water. Everything has their own time. You can only chop that vegetable so fast, and then you're going to cut your finger. And then they might not look the way you want them when you plate it. So you see how everything is moving together? This symphonic aspect of things. Think of a tree, think of the ocean with an emergent wave, think of a symphony. They're all different ways of looking at a singular, omnipresent, omnidirectional event that is you. Now, it looks like you are linear tracking in consciousness. Each of us are riding our little time thing, and we're tending with stuff. As Bob said, that's what we're conscious of. It's being fed and informed by our unconscious, by our feelings, all kinds of different things. But the direction of that, the direction that you are taking it, is really the telling of the tale. Seriously, the telling of the tale. Now, our storytellers are trying to catch up. Socially, if you just watch the NCIS crime shows, they're dealing with Asian hate, they're dealing with Muslim hate, they're dealing with differentiation and complexification issues, and semi-permeability issues of what do you let in and what do you not. It's really interesting for me to see a lot of what's going on in a mythic sense of the human family and these stories trying to connect us to each other and with the oneness of being, with an environmental now is the model for that, because it has to be. It's life. So anyway, I throw that out there, and I want our listeners to see that it's happening all around us if we begin to see it. Go ahead, Bob.
I just want to elaborate a little bit on the interconnectedness of consciousness, because as we've discussed in previous episodes, consciousness can't arise without the interaction with other people. It has been shown by many studies over many years that we require interaction to become fully human. And those interactions are part of the oneness of consciousness, because they then lead to further complexification and differentiation. They require semi-permeability to isolate the signal from the noise. And this is happening all the time. So in a sense, if you step back from all these individual nodes and try and picture all these interactions going on, you've got a whole new level of consciousness, a whole new expression of the one in this interaction of all of these individuals. And that is an incredible metaphor to think about. And if you look at it anthropologically, it's really the evolution of culture, because culture is the sharing of ideas from one person to another, and encoding those ideas within this larger cultural framework, whether they use writing or pictures or songs or whatever. That is how culture absorbs the individual's ideas and shares them with the collective.
And consciousness is at a junction, a new node, because we're moving from cultural definitions to natural definitions, and cultures have been trying to analog that all along. They've, if you look at whether the gods of the East or the West, unless you put a seed into the soil and in the darkness, remove it from the light, it will not grow. There are these analogs that are both that are cultural, but they're trying to capture something. And we've talked about, the spiritual journey is moving in accord with the oneness of being, and that's what we're trying to do. But there is a new cultural understanding trying to break through, and it's global. It now is looking at the differences, not trying to wash them out, but trying to see how they fit together and create a larger mind. And I think this is part of what you're replying or implying, Bob, is that when we begin to get back and we begin to see these different strains and strands of cultural sensibilities get together over a life issue, whether it's the virus or whether it's climate change, we're now seeing we're all in it together, and there has to be an overriding narrative of consciousness. And consciousness itself, speaking in the language of being, life, and consciousness, that this mystery that we're a part of has to be an integral piece, in my mind, to the story that we're telling.
Yeah, and that's where we come into the other big three: truth, love, and justice. Because that's how we share with each other in an equitable manner. And that's how we have developed over the years through our culture, through our different ways of communicating with each other. Those three, truth, love, and justice, are how the whole interaction works. It's the oil that keeps it going, to throw another metaphor in on top of all the others. And, I could start throwing in systems analysis terms and all this kind of stuff. But the idea is that the sharing has to be total sharing. It can't be, I'm going to share with this group over here, but this other group over here, I'm not going to share with. Then you're losing the larger system, if you will. Like, I have to fall back on systems terms. And it is how we judge those interactions, how we rank those interactions, how we choose those interactions. And that's where
how we twist the truth in order to preserve a culture of the past that no longer will work in the future. Because that's part, as you're talking, Bob, I'm thinking, truth is great, but the fact is truth is being twisted so far. I'm working on a little song, and it's got, who would have thought it could end this way, the truth twisted so far that no one can say what is real.
Yeah.
What is real? And we've got to have all be participating in the same reality, if you will. And when a parallel reality is created, it's very, very difficult. And this is a problem of consciousness. Okay, this is a problem of who was it that said we put our biggest guards at the door of our own emptiness? Because we don't want to experience it. We'll do anything to protect ourselves from that place. And there's a lot that gets emptied in the new world. I've talked about my struggle with being a Southern boy in the new narrative, and I could cry right now because it hurts so bad of all the lies I've been told and the crap. Yeah. It's just it's part of my tragedy.
See, that's. Let me throw another metaphor in, and let's talk about the health of the emerging global consciousness. And where we have these distortions of the truth, where we have hate instead of love, where we have inequities instead of justice, that's like a sickness in the global consciousness that is evolving. And just like a sickness in the body, we have to find ways to cure ourselves of that. We have to get rid of the dis-ease that's in our global consciousness, which in large part is due to untruths and inequities,
but we need
and injustices.
There can be no prognosis, good or bad, without a diagnosis. And to be diagnosed, there has to be an acknowledgement. And we are just now beginning to see and acknowledge this backlash of truth, if you will, because it hurts so bad and it's calling for such huge change in the way we think, the way we live, and that's perceived as a threat to people's very way of life. And this is part of the oscillation of the oneness of being, of continuing to go back into our origin, our place of, when you get confused, to go back to the beginning. It's as simple as that, as Indigo Montoya would say. And that's what all of us are trying to do, or many of us are trying to do. There is a rising wave of human beings concerned with their spiritual well-being as well as their physical well-being. And this is becoming prevalent even in politics. I mean, I read, these books on Trump, and General Milley, wow, unbelievable human being. People can say what they want about Colin Powell. He screwed up. He admitted he screwed up. He feels like he got used. That, to me, is a different order of honesty and integrity. There's a place where we get to see others who are truly human beings and are applying themselves in ways that have to do with truth, love, and justice, with what is real, what is it that connects us, and how do we make sure and assure that everybody has a piece of that action. Those are part of the going back to the one phenomenon. And I want our listeners to really get this. Please understand how looking in different directions is helpful. This Janus-headed aspect of ourselves. Think about it, and I go back to what I started with. He was the Roman god of beginnings and endings, of all the gates and transitions and the times and the dualities and the doorways and passages and the frames that are between the two. And that takes us looking at things anew. This podcast has been really about looking at things anew. Are we trying to sell you something? No, I'm just trying to think out loud here, and Bob's trying to think out loud of our journey, of what we've studied and experienced, and what our realities are. We're both a couple of mystics, maybe misfit mystics. But I know Bob for 50 years, and we've been struggling to consciously make touch with this oneness of being, to consciously be aware of the flits and flashes of unconscious insight, that we might have some sense of the seething unconscious place that literally is the soil of our being and that joins us to the rest of the universe. This has been the journey of our podcast. It's been Bob and I's journey. Mary Ann is not here, but I can speak for her in this, in saying that that's been the gist of her journey as well. And how we do that, we've been talking about that for a couple years on this podcast. And again, we would love to hear from you. Let me know at redhawkthedeepend@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. We get ideas of where our listeners are, but not who they are or anything like that. And we'd love to know who you are. Write me. Just email me and say, I think your podcast is crap. The one thing I did hear from a listener was that our podcast is evil and a threat to an existential threat, which I thought was awesome, man. I went, wow, I never knew I could be an existential threat. Consciousness, you see, I'm thinking out loud. I'm a little node of consciousness, and I'm just trying to plug in to the universe like you tap a keg and turn it on and let it flow through me. And I've got two other cohorts here that are doing the same thing. So given what I've just said, Bob, what flows through you?
At my age, don't want to get too deep into that. But
and you should do your final comments because we're about there.
Roger that. I just want to say that this journey of trying to figure out my own consciousness has been helped a lot by the ideas I've learned studying Zen, which is basically says that your awareness in the moment is all there is, and you have the power to direct that awareness and use that awareness in a positive way. It doesn't really change anything except the way you approach the world. And maybe that really changes more than we think.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, ain't that the truth. So, you know, I want to go somewhere that I hadn't thought of before. And I've thought of it, but, you know, it's not where I wanted to go at the beginning of this podcast. See, there's this transition happening. And it's quite a transition. We talked about it today. It's a consciousness transition. It is a cultural transition where all these cultures of the world are having to now put themselves within a larger cultural order of global awareness. Wow. And you know, we might not be able to do it. We might create the Third World War and, start over, erase the board. Who really knows? I don't know, but I know this. That is the journey that's before us. We are now moving into global consciousness. It's not my national identity. It's my planetary identity. And it has to somehow take precedence over all the stuff and all the stories we've been told. And I'm a hardcore American. I'm a patriot in the truest sense of the word. But maybe we all need to become matriots first, where our true allegiance is to the ground we walk on and the sky we all breathe from around the world. My friends, God's peace, God's love, and in all things, may you be one.